What is culture? In the following video, we will delve into the definition of culture and examine the question of how cultures can be described and differentiated in a scientific way. At the end of the video, practical consequences pertaining to international education managers are also mentioned. How can culture be defined? In its everyday sense, the term culture is often limited to indicate tangible cultural productions such as museum exhibitions, concerts, and theatre premieres. But in a broader sense, the term culture incorporates everything that determines the social life of a country, region, company, or social group. As coined by Ruth Benedict in 1934, a culture is a more or less consistent pattern of thought and action. Think of cultures with strict rules around courtesy that prevent people from directly saying something that the other person may not want to hear. Edward T. Hall calls these cultures high-context cultures. Other cultures, where individuals communicate directly without giving much consideration to others' feelings, are referred to by Hall as low-context cultures. We see that this broader definition of culture encompasses phenomena that occur without being intended by any individual. How can cultural differences be described and measured? The works of Hert Hofstede and the Globe Study will be briefly introduced. To this day, these two comprehensive studies have had a major influence on the scientific discussion around culture and are considered classics for their description and measurement of cultures. The first empirical study to measure cultural differences took place in the late 1960s by the Dutch social psychologist Hert Hofstede, who asked IBM middle managers across various countries to define their most important work values. He categorized their answers into 4 cultural dimensions and ranked all 76 participating countries from 0 to 100% on these dimensions. Initially, Hofstede only developed 4 dimensions. Power distance, the first dimension, measures how important hierarchy is in a culture. Hierarchical societies are much more present throughout the world than egalitarian societies. The second dimension differentiates individualistic societies, where the ties between individuals are loose, with collectivist societies, where people are integrated into strong, cohesive in-groups. The third dimension characterizes the preferred social behavior style, which can either be more masculine or more feminine. Hofstede defines masculine behavior as assertive, tough, and geared towards material success, and feminine behavior as modest, affectionate, concerned about the quality of life. Uncertainty avoidance, the fourth dimension, measures to what extent the members of a culture feel threatened by ambiguous or unfamiliar situations. The need for security can be high, but there are also cultures that are less stressed by uncertainty. In later publications, Hofstede defined 2 more dimensions himself, while other studies added a variety of additional dimensions. Nevertheless, the original 4 dimensions by Hofstede are seen as the bare minimum to describe cultural differences, albeit in a greatly simplified manner. A significant expansion of the Hofstede approach can be seen in the Globe Study conducted by a large international research team directed by Robert J. House in the 1990s. The Globe Study leaves 2 Hofstede dimensions virtually unchanged: power distance and uncertainty avoidance. The 2 other Hofstede dimensions are split up into 2 further dimensions: collectivism into in-group and institutional collectivism, and masculinity into assertiveness and gender egalitarianism. 3 new dimensions are additionally established: the orientation toward high performance, the engagement in future orientation, and humane orientation. Furthermore, all dimensions are subdivided into a level of practices and a level of values. The practice level indicates how widespread a certain behavior is. The values level describes how strongly the respective behavior is desired within a culture, as well as defines what exactly is seen as a target mark of the respective dimension. Let's illustrate this with a few examples. The performance orientation dimension measures the extent of innovation, competition, and performance rewards. If the value level of the dimension scores higher than the practice level, it means that performance is considered a high value but is less common in practice. For most cultural dimensions, their value scores surpass their practice scores. However, the power distance dimension is an exception. Here, the practice scores are quite high, while the value scores are very low. This suggests that people want more equality than they are currently experiencing. Another special case is the in-group collectivism dimension, where the practice scores are high, but the value scores are even higher. This means that strong bonds within the group are experienced in everyday life, but are valued even more. This distribution of practices and values is the same in all cultures worldwide. A particularly striking point is that they all share a common profile. Nevertheless, there are differences too, especially at the level of actual practice. The range of cultural differences is less impressive in the Globes study, but more realistic than in Hofstadter's lists. In-group collectivism is greatly practiced throughout Southern Asia and Latin America, but much less in Nordic Europe and the Anglo world. High-performance orientation is practiced in Confucian Asia and the Anglo world, and much less in Eastern Europe and Latin America. Globes' statistical methodology is fairly sophisticated, allowing us to relate the cultural dimensions to results from other social studies. High practice scores in performance orientation, future orientation, and uncertainty avoidance correspond to high degrees of economic health and quality of life conditions. The same is true for low scores in power distance and in-group collectivism practices. There are no such correlations at the level of values. International education management practitioners may only need a small part of this analysis, namely the statements around the differences between the two or more cultures in which they are involved. Authors like Erin Meyer recommend communicating as explicitly as possible, especially in the case of multicultural settings. How to communicate explicitly will be part of another video.